Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Hearts of Iron 4 video. If you look at Twitter, it seems like we're moving into the next phase of the development and planning of the next DLC. So I thought now would be a good time to talk about some small little things I thought could be added to the game. This is actually one of two videos I wanted to make, this having lots of small little ideas, and the other having one major idea. So yeah, this is just going to talk about some interesting little things I thought could be added to the game. If you've got any interesting suggestions, you could leave them as a comment in the comment section below and I can read them, or you could head over to the Paradox forums where they have a suggestions section for Hearts of Iron 4 and suggest them to the devs, which is probably what I should be doing. But I make videos too, so I'm making a video. Okay, let's talk about some stuff. If you've played as Britain, you probably know that oil can sometimes be an issue. It really depends on if America is capable of supplying you with their oil across the Atlantic. This brought me to a consideration. The first one being, why don't we have the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company? If we look here in jolly old Iran, it's a happy place, we can see if we go to the resources menu that there's actually 42 oil here and 12 oil here. Now, historically, the British did have the mandate of the oil in the southern region, the Soviets taking over the northern bit. This caused so much contention that in 1942, the Soviets and the British actually jointly invaded Iran to secure the oil imports so they could fund the war. This feature is currently lacking in its entirety, and since I doubt that the next DLC is going to be about Iran, I think adding in some kind of idea or method for Britain to have priority over the oil could be interesting. Okay, so the next thing is a bit of a pet peeve of mine, and it's to do with straits. So if we go down here, we have the Istanbul Strait, and we have some very peculiar straits to do with the island of Lesbos straight into the continent here. So for those who are interested, this distance here is negligible. It is a river, but it's very negligible. This distance here is about, what, 8 to 9 miles? So it really does beg the question about one location. The Dardanelles. The Dardanelles is a region that has long been used as a crossing. It was used by the Persians, and yet there's no crossing here, which means if you ever go to war with Turkey, you must only go through the Strait of Istanbul, which is it's terrible. It's always a clog up. I just feel like this is like my pet peeve. Just a little strait here from this province to this province, just so there's another way into Turkey. My next suggestion will probably get me a little bit of flack because I know there's so much varying opinion about this, but I'm going to stick to it. And I think that the game would be better with more releasable nations. When we had Le Resistance, France was able to release Brittany, Corsica, and quite peculiarly Occitania, or the southern French region. But using that as a precedent, I thought that it is more sensible also to have Italy, a country that was long-standingly separated into many different minor kingdoms. So in a somewhat historical sense, to some degree, it could be plausible that there could be separation. My reasoning is that player choice and giving the player lots of avenues to play the game seems so important to the replayability. Some people want to play as Wales, some people want to play as Brittany, and I think some people would enjoy playing as some Italian miners. I mean, if you wanted, you don't just have to stop at regions like Savoy, Sardinia or Naples. You could completely balkanize Italy, at which point you might end up with something a little bit like this. Italy has basically disappeared off the map, although I would say as a caveat I don't think this should be doable in vanilla base game. Similar with what we had with Spain, where if you have the preset of the 11th of November, which is the EU4 mode for Spain, I think there could be an EU4 mode for Italy, where it just completely balkanizes all of it and has things like the Papal States. I was thinking you could also extend this to other places. So one of them is Texas, the Lone Star State. Again, not the most likely thing to happen in the world, and maybe not plaused in any realistic historical sense, but I could definitely imagine some people wanting to play as an independent Texas. Moving over to East Asia, I think Hong Kong, Macau, and if you're feeling really ahistorical, the French region over here, could become their own independent nations. I mean, Hong Kong was vying for independence in its own right. I'm not sure whether to categorise this with the previous stuff I was talking about. Czechoslovakia, as seen here, Czechoslovakia, has the ability in-game to become Czech Republic and Slovakia. I feel like there should be the ability for the Czechoslovakians, i.e. the Czechs, to release Slovakia and become the Czech Republic of their own right. The last DLC gave us one of the most requested features to do with one of the most important nations in the game, that being Tanatuva, which finally got a portrait for Salchak Toka, which I think is great. It honestly is. They had the goal of sticking a portrait for every starting country in the game. There are a few more people I think could be cool to have their own custom portraits though. So I'm going to list just a few people I think could be cool to have interesting portraits. The first one being Nikita Khrushchev. Now, I'm sure he's not a very important historical figure. I don't think he did much, but there's something about this individual person that I think could use a really good custom portrait. Although they did get the bald thing right. Speaking of historical figures, if you go communist Vietnam, you might find yourself run by a guy called Ho Chi Minh, who I also think is a relatively famous person of history. No, but in all seriousness, Ho Chi Minh, massively famous historical figure, I think totally has the justification for his own custom portrait. And, if we're also staying in Vietnam, I think having the Emperor of Vietnam, if you go non-aligned, would be a more interesting figure to have as well. That being Emperor Bao Dai, but, well, Emperor Bao Dai isn't here. But if he was here, that could be another cool monarchist nation to play. And the game does have a lot of monarchies in it. The next one, I'm not 100% sure about myself, but a custom portrait for Edwin Barclay, the leader of Liberia. The people on Paradox say they've already made one for every starting nation in 1936, but I thought this was the generic African portrait leader for a democratic country. Edwin Barclay is famously, in one of his pictures, he has his glasses on and he's wearing a hat, I think. So I thought that could be a cool portrait for them to use instead of this generic one. Moving into the releasable nation of Egypt, one of the few releasable nations of England, regardless of whether they're going decolonisation or not, here we have Farouk of Egypt. But this is not Farouk, this is generic military man 7. It even says here that these are the royalists and his name is Farouk. So I think a custom portrait for is he the Emperor of Egypt or the King of Egypt? Or is it the Shah of Egypt? He's the something of Egypt, that's for certain, and he wears a fez. And I think seeing a dude with a fez on is a cool portrait. So if we see one for Egypt, I'll think that's pretty cool. Alright, so we're out here playing some Zibidi Sanmar, and I'm sure I'm not the first one to have gone down the opposition route to find themselves looking at the Sikh-Japanese support decisions. And I don't know about you, but if you see them, they're pretty lackluster. So let's take a look here. If we seek to Japanese support, we have to get some internal party support, which gives us massive political power gain loss, massive weekly stability lost, for a somewhat pathetic 0.05 fascism support. If we go with a more aggressive policy, we lose a massive weekly stability and infantry equipment for some more, but not really that much. And if we manage to do all of that, we have the honour of becoming a pathetic puppet of Japan. So to wrap up my suggestion, I think that these decisions could use a little bit of a buff, or just making them less depressive. And so we return to the glorious land of Peru. I couldn't get away with not talking about Peru, could I? Oscar would be livid with me.
Finally, I have returned to claim my great Peruvian DLC, filled with massive buffs and overpowered Peruvian focused tree. I'm sure you're going to suggest the greatest buff to South America the game has ever seen to finally form Balava's empire.
Unfortunately for him, my next suggestion probably will anger him, because I don't think Peru should look like this. I think it should look like this.
bitch.
So I know this is probably gonna not be right and it's still historically problematic, etc., etc. I understand. But with the current format of how the states look, it would be more correct for Ecuador to own this territory because the Ecuadorian-Peruvian War of 1942 was fought over this surrounding region, which Ecuador already had and Peru wanted to get back. So it would make less sense that Peru already starts with it. It would make more sense that we should give Ecuador it, stick Peru with the core, and thus Peru can, justify on core to get back Ecuador. It makes Ecuador stronger because they have another state, but it also makes Peru more fun to play because if they justify for the core claim, it's even faster, which means they can have a faster war. I think both countries are even better if we do this. Of course, the Ecuador-Peruvian War was solved by the Rio Pact, but I doubt we're going to see anything like the Rio Pacts coming in anytime soon. Just the state will do for me though, just the state. Okay, so I thought I'd quickly come back to the, entry-level lobby screen. Not something we typically look at, lobby screens, unless you're watching like a stream of Twitch of a multiplayer lobby. My suggestion for this part is to adding more game setup rules, including fragmentation statuses and presets for different nations. There was recently a mod that was released that did something similar for what I'm asking, with formable nations already being formed, and I think it's such a good idea, they could definitely implement many of these suggestions into the game already. I think one of them definitely could be to do with Hungary, perhaps saying that Hungary already owns its surrounding territories, or Hungary has already got Austria-Hungary's territory, that meaning Otto's there and they're good to go already. There could be a preset so that Czechoslovakia is already the Czech Republic and Slovakia. That's if you want a modern day version of the map. With America, I think it'd be really interesting if there was a preset to allow the Confederate States of America to already exist in this southern place. If you actually release them, they already have their decisions, and you could even give them their own, the American focus tree. So both the United States and the Confederate States already have their trees. So in 1936, you could play as the Confederates in a, preset decolonized America, if you will, or a fragmented, we'll say, and then play the game as either the North or the South and be straight into the American Civil War. I think that could be a very fun scenario to have as a preset. If they ever did make the releasables for Italy, you could have two versions. You could have, of course, the small ones, the more likely ones like Sardinia, or maybe southern Italy like southern France. And then you could have, of course, the 11th of November, as seen here, the 11th of November, in which all of it's gone. All of it is back in 1444, full EU4 mode, full-on chaos. And I think the biggest fragmentation status I want is also one for Germany, because currently if you want to fragment Germany, the only way to do it is to go as France, do their focus tree with Napoleon, and then fragment Germany that way to get all of the little kingdoms that appeared, like Mecklenburg and Saxony and Bavaria. If there was a way in game setup to fragment Germany into those kingdoms, as well as having a way to fragment it into East Germany and West Germany, that's like two incredible scenarios you could have at the start of the game. I think that more alt history at this point, as long as it's in the sort of game setup and not sort of forcing the historical game, is always going to be better. Disclaimer, if it's in the game setup, it doesn't affect historical. It should be completely separate to the base game World War II simulator. Disclaimer. While on the subject of fragmentation and decolonisation, I thought I'd quickly bring up how peculiar it is that the country of Guyana owns the territories of the Pitcairns down here, and the Falklands and the South Georgia Islands, instead of Argentina and Chile. And for my last suggestion, can we please make Canada back to their normal colour, even if they're decolonised? I think this is... white Canada. It's... I liked it when it was red. Please. Okay, so that sums up this video of suggestions. I'm sure there's literally 8 billion more things we could sit here and discuss. Changes and things and that. But I just wanted to talk about some small things to, invigorate the discussion and see what people want. So as I said, if you've got any suggestions, feel free to tell me in the comments. Feel free to go over to Paradox forums and ask them over there. I hope you enjoyed talking about these things. I'll be amazed if any of my suggestions make it into the next DLC. I'll be amazed. But I guess I should go on the forums and suggest them. So I guess I'll go do that. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Oh yeah, if I make the video about the next important feature, so make sure to subscribe so that you can see that video, because that should be a cool video. Also, we're moving into Dev Diaries, so my Dev Diary videos will be back. So that's another reason to subscribe if you haven't. Okay, I'm really going. Thank you for watching. Okay,